Okay, can you all see? Let me just make it a little bit bigger. We can see it better. So, I guess the elements of dynamic web design. The key word here is the elements. Okay, and of course, dynamic is what it entails about this class. Is the essence of applying JavaScript to your web pages. Okay, so dynamic is equal to JavaScript. So when we talk about the elements of web design, we're talking about these three things here. There's three components which you've already seen for the last, I don't know, couple of years or so. You see the HTML, which is HTML5. These are the actual logo they use for these technologies. HTML5, CSS3, and then JavaScript or the JS. And these are the latest versions so far, and the latest stable version that are being used today in the market. So as you can see there, under the HTML5 is responsible for the content, right? It contains the content or the actual data, the structural elements of the of your web page, and then CSS is the style, or we call it the presentational language, whereas the HTML is semantic language, right? And then we have now the behavioral, or the interaction, or the interactive part of this website or web pages, which is JavaScript. Okay, and these are becoming so standardized now, so common that they are become the big three, I would say, languages or technologies that built into most modern browsers, which means that you don't have to do any additional or integration on your web page. It comes with the browsers already. Okay, so so here again, by standardizing these, then therefore we no longer have to write a lot of I guess additional text into our scripts or code. So you can see that the HTML5 version is just basically the doc type, which is required for all document pages, and then the word HTML, and you close the bracket, and that's it, right? That tells you that that document is in HTML5 version. The previous one, I think you saw in the book, has a long string of data, right? You have to have the strict type, or is it the version 4.01, and then you provide all those other thousands of things in there, right? Just to make it at that version 4. I mean, some sites still use that though. You still use that, especially if you're going to build like Java pages, okay? Because Java actually, or JSF actually needs the XML part of it. So you still probably use the HTML4, which is fine. But so that is the shortened version of HTML5, very easy with the style and the style sheet, and then the script as well. You can see that we just put the tag style and also the tag for script, and the browsers know by default that you're expecting a style sheet and also the JavaScript for your script. In the old days, or prior to this, we have to specify what type is the script going to be. Is it a TypeScript? Is it a JS script, or is it a VB script, or many other scripts? You have to explicitly say that or write that in the code. But now you just put script and then you're done. Okay, so very standardized. And so we have these three different layers that are built into the browser and now built into all web documents. And this is also the directional flow of the DOM manipulation. So DOM is the document object model. As you can see that the lower level here, how we want to phrase it or look at this, high level or low level, it doesn't matter. But just understand and know that the direction of manipulating these DOM elements, which is the HTML tag itself, is from JavaScript to style sheets to the HTML tag itself. Okay, so what this means that CSS cannot manipulate JavaScript, right? It can only manipulate HTML tags, and then JavaScript can manipulate both of them. Okay, it itself as well. So that's the flow. So HTML5, again, this is just a review, right? It's the markup tags, and if you look at it this way, you think about the structure of a web page. It's like you have these building blocks, the structure of this building. You have all these things put in place to make sure that the building stands, or your web page stands, it doesn't break. If you miss one of these tags, then usually you break your page, and that's why you have an error on your page, right? So if it's fully or properly constructed, it won't break, and that's why I ask you to validate your documents. Make sure to pass the validation. Of course, nowadays a lot of sites don't really care about that anymore, because why? Because most browsers are smart enough to fix that automatically for you, so you don't have to, fix every little tidbit. But as a web developer, you want to make sure that you understand why things are built the way they are and why they're important, right? So once you have this structure built, and then that's all you have, right? You don't have the opportunity to style it to make it more beautiful, more interactive, and so on. And so that's why now you have the second layer, which is a CSS3. And CSS3 is because the latest version is version 3. Hello, Sabrina, how are you? Hang in there? Okay. So version 3 is CSS3, and we have version 1, which is way back in the 90s, and then version 2, early 2000s, and then 3, which is right about the same time as CSS5, about 2010 or so. Okay, so the difference between 2 and 3 and 1 is just they introduce new tags and new rules. We call those new modules into the CSS. So, for example, things that you already use today, if you have taken the other class, is like when you supply a border and a shadow around images or tags. Those are part of CSS3. The version 2 does not have those options. All right, so there are a lot of features that were not available in version 2. So I mean, that's okay, because we want to move on to the latest version, right? So, but so far it is version 3, this latest one. And there are 3 types. Okay, if you haven't, if you are not familiar with this, we have 3 types of style sheets. And then this is in order of precedence, meaning from the way the browser will apply these rules to your web page, right? So we have the top layer, which is the user agent style sheets. These are built into the browser themselves. So each browser has its own style sheet. It's a default style sheet. In case that, let's just say you build a web page or website and you don't supply any style rules, right? So what it is that it is default style sheet that is supplied by the browser, and each browser has its own default style sheet. So if you render a page on Chrome, it may look different on Firefox and IE and Opera and so on. Okay, but they do have a built-in browser style sheet. The next one is the user style sheets. I'm kind of torn between number 2 and 3 here. Okay, but I think the way it's flow is probably this way. So you have this user style sheets. This is a style sheet that is set by the user, like you and me, for example. Let's just say you go to Google site, okay? So, or even Facebook, right? Facebook has a style sheet that's built into the site already, and you actually have the power to change all the style rules. You can create your own style rules, and you can apply it to Facebook, but it only affects your browser. So you can see it in a different way by supplying your own CSS style sheet. To do that, you have to install an extension to your browser, right? So if you go to Chrome and you search for CSS or user style extension, then you can install that extension, and then you can write your own CSS for Facebook, and you load that in your browser, and it'll affect Facebook, the presentation layer of it all, but only affects on what you see on your local machine. Okay, so that will take precedence. That will override any of the user agent style rules, right? It's not very common, but it's just that you can do that if you want to. And this is useful for, I should say, people with disabilities, right? If you have some issues with that, and the site does not provide you with those features, then you can provide your own style rules and override that page or that site with your own styles. So you can have it so it can read it back to you, has reader screens and so built into the style rules. Okay. And number 3 is probably the most popular one, which is the author style sheet, right? The author is basically you. When you build your web page or any web page, you build with a CSS, and you apply the CSS either directly to the page or through the external file, right? So that's you. Okay. And here I just have a list of how the browser will detect and how it would apply these rules to a particular tag. Okay, so this is the way how CSS is applied to your web page. Okay, again, CSS only applies to HTML tags, not on JavaScript, because it's a layer below JavaScript. Okay, so now we move on to an example of CSS. So let's say we have to build the house built, and then we apply the rules to it. Have it so it's color and nicely decorated, right? It gives a really nice presentation, right? That's the point. Versus a plain building. And then finally, we have JavaScript. Okay, so JavaScript is also called the ECMAScript, or sometimes you see the word ES5 or ES6. Okay, it's a short name for ECMAScript. And ECMAScript is, I think we talk about this as well in the other class, is that ECMA stands for the European Computer Manufacturers Association. It's a huge consortium organization that maintains some type of standards for not just JavaScript, for computer languages as well. Like for example, like C# has been I'll say inducted into the ECMAScript standard as of 2001 as a international or universal language that applies to most modern computers. So same thing with JavaScript. Okay, and I'm glad they had that, because you have to have a way to standardize these. Otherwise, you have your own versions of JavaScript, which is, we're going back to the 90s. We have the browser war. This is exactly what happened back in the 90s. We have Netscape has its own JavaScript, and then Microsoft has its own script called JScript. So really, it's just a copy of JavaScript, really, and they kind of tweak it a little bit into their own version. So you have two separate scripts here, and then if you want to build a site for Netscape, well, then you are actually losing the E side of it. So you have to have two separate sites just to accommodate those two, right? So without standardization, you can imagine how difficult it can be for us to build websites these days. You imagine you have a third script going on, right, for Opera and so on. So they took care of that for us, which is great. Okay, so ECMAScript is the universal name. If you hear JavaScript or JS or JavaScript, 1.8.5, that is the name used for Mozilla, which is Firefox, right? Because they invented the language in Netscape, and so they still keep their version name JavaScript 1.2.3, whatever it is. Okay, so right now I think it's 1.8.5 or 0.7 is the latest version, which is equivalent to ES6 or ES7. I think 7 is the latest one now. So again, here is a few things about JavaScript, what it is, what it is not. Okay, it is not Java. We learned about that already, right? Because I think they borrowed the name from Java because they want the language or that language to look cool, to sound cool, along with Java. Okay, so again, it was kind of difficult back then because Java was a very hard language to learn back in the days. And so when people hear the term Java, it's like, oh, it's just almost like assembly language, you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, not attractive. So when they change it from LiveScript to JavaScript, it's kind of like they kind of lose a lot of the users back then, or developers back then, until like in the late 90s, and it started to come up again when they see the effects or how JavaScript was used to, allow users to build interactive applications. And so eventually, and then finally, we're able to like differentiate itself into its own unique language. Okay, it was kind of tough back in the days. So it is not Java. It is not a derivative of Java either. Okay, so it borrows a lot of the syntax from it, but it's not Java. And so if you look at this diagram again, so now we have the house, the structure built. We color it, right, for the style, and now we have to supply functionality to the house, right? When you open the door, what does it do? When you enter a room, what does it do? When you hit the wall, what does it do, right? So you provide all these interaction, and that is where JavaScript comes into play. Okay, provides these interactions.